quarter of a mile, at Wagoners Roundabout, take the second exit onto the Parkway A312. Exit the roundabout onto the Parkway. Continue on the Parkway for 1 mile.
And he doesn't have a relationship as such with my brother, but that's something that he needs to work on. As far as I'm concerned, I'm at peace within myself, and yeah.
What would you, just finally, it's incredibly brave you talk about this openly, I'm really, really grateful that you have. What would your advice be for people listening who, maybe it's not a similar situation completely, but are sort of weighing up whether to forgive someone who's wronged them in some way, possibly not as severely as your brother did to you? What's your advice when it comes to forgiveness?
So I tutor and I say to the students, so that's how my students what's happened to me, but I tell them that the anger that they carry, it's like carrying hot coal in your hand, and all it's doing is it's hurting you, it's causing you pain. You need to just let go, because by letting go, by forgiving, you are able to move on. So you need to do it for yourself more than anything else.
Claire, an absolute privilege to speak to you, pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry for what you went through. What an incredible, powerful story. What an incredible person you sound like you are, for being able to not forget, of course you never forget something like that, but being able to forgive, to come to acceptance, to make peace with what happened, and even to restore and resurrect some sort of relationship with the brother that abused you. That's Claire and Ian, really, really good to speak to you. Lots of texts coming in on this. This one from Peter in Enfield. The power of forgiveness comes into its own if something tragic happens to one of the party at odds. He says, back in 2008, my mother and her brother fell out badly and unbelievably over a parking space. Neither one was back down. Then tragically, my mother had a stroke and passed away. He says, my uncle felt so lost and sad. Oh, this is heartbreaking. My uncle felt so lost and sad that they'd never made up. A salutary reminder not to let...
In 300 yards, at Cranford Parkway Interchange, take the second exit onto the M4 slip road to Heathrow Airport, M25.
Brother and sister was for what, says Peter. God, that's sad, isn't it? Falling out over a parking space and never having the opportunity to make up, never having the opportunity to say, actually, this isn't worth it, that the blood, that our relationship, that our love is much more important than this parking. I know I've got friends, I know family, friends in similar situations, falling out over what was actually comparatively really minor things, and never, the stubbornness or whatever it was on both sides, never making up, never forgiving, never reconciling, and then someone getting ill or someone dying, and that being how...
Exit the roundabout onto the slip road.
Never go to bed on an argument, because you never know what's going to happen.
In a quarter of a mile, merge onto M4.
You might have. Mary's calling from Acton. Hi, Mary.
Hello.
What made you pick up the phone?
Because I can relate to the topic you're talking about.
Tell me why.
Well, when I was a kid, decent to add an innocent child, I was verbally, physically, emotionally abused by my mother. I realized through a tremendous amount of counseling over the years that she took her frustrations out on me. I was like a punching bag, really, because she wasn't able to really confront the people who actually caused her the pain that she was experiencing. which was my stepdad at the time, her boyfriend, and my elder sibling, and her boyfriend by his stepdad. I suppose in today's language, they groomed my older sister.
Your stepdad?
He developed a sexual relationship with her, and she eventually became pregnant and had his child.
How old was she then, Mary?
She was 16. Yeah.
And do you have are your mum and stepdad still alive, firstly?
Yeah.
And what's your relationship with them like now?
So I don't see my stepdad anymore. I haven't seen him for some time. The relationship fizzled out, thankfully. Like I said earlier on, through a tremendous amount of counselling over the years, there was reconciliation between my mother and I, and between my mother and my older sister, and her son. And as I say in America, it's not completely unpeachy keen, but it's water under the bridge now, I suppose.
That reconciliation, what did that look like? How long did it take? How did it come about? How difficult was it?
Well, for me, it was intensely difficult because it seriously damaged my self-esteem, my abilities to, like, for example, my abilities to actually look someone in the eye. Like, almost impossible for me to do that for longer than a split second because I felt so damaged, and I became incredibly paranoid. And whenever I used to walk past buses, I used to think everyone was looking at me, and they were criticizing me because my mother, she used to just hell. They would abuse at me, like saying, you're ugly, you're worthless, you're no good. And so after a while, I started to believe those things.
Well, that's not surprising, Mary. So what was it that prompted you to decide to try and forgive and reconcile with her?
Deep down, I knew that I wasn't those things that my mother told me, but because I heard it so often, I struggled with it. And because I read a lot as well, I was really into philosophy and sociology, things of that nature, and so I knew I could be better than where I was, and I didn't want to be like them, meaning my mother, her boyfriend, and my older sister. And so I sought counseling because they didn't speak about it, they just they didn't family members, they just brushed it under the carpet, for lack of a better term right now. But it really, really affected me.
In a quarter of a mile, keep right to stay on M4.
So I did get in touch with Childline, and they did help me a little bit. And as I said, I spent a lot of time at library reading, so I knew I could get some help, and I just sought the help that was available, and it did help me.
So it's the counselling and talking to other people that led you to think, actually, I do want to start to try
keep right to stay on M4.
Yes, and also like a belief in God as well.
And how did she respond? Did she accept that she treated you?
Continue on M4 for 2 miles.
Years later she did, and she did apologise, yes.
And was that, how significant a moment was that for you, the acceptance of what you'd been through? She accepted as well as well?
It was huge. It wasn't, I think I was with terms of the fact that I wasn't at fault. That was more significant for me. And knowing that I had forgiven them, that was much more significant. And whether or not they apologised, my older sister, I don't recall her ever apologising. She passed away so long ago.
Your sister passed away?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Mary. And your mother, they hadn't rebuilt their relationship?
No, they had, yeah.
But she hadn't apologised?
Well, not to me. But it does affect me because I knew I'd forgiven them. And so it doesn't matter if they don't apologise at all.
Mary, lovely to speak to you. Really, really glad you called in. Thank you for telling your story. Very brave of you. Again, 2 incredible stories there of courage and strength and compassion, but both united, I think, in the decision to forgive someone, not for the other person's sake, but for their own. Not wanting to carry that weight of anger, not wanting to carry that, and deciding actually, for purely self-interested reasons, and completely understandably, to try to forgive someone who actually had, in some ways, no right to be forgiven for Mary's sake, for her own sake. Mary, I'm really, really grateful that you called in. Do you relate to anything we're just talking about? Those were to put it bluntly, quite extreme examples of misbehaviour, of abuse, where in both cases, both women decided to forgive their relatives for what had happened. There's a lot of other examples coming in. Does any of what we've spoken about resonate with your experience? Tell me about when you've forgiven someone or been forgiven. I want to hear about it. Have you, as one texter told us, failed to make up with someone before it was too late? We've heard from Claire and Mary, who were able to hear
In a quarter of a mile, keep right to stay on
Has
M4.
that happened to you? 0345 6060 973, the number to call. You can text me on 84850 or tweet at LBC. Or have you perhaps made up with things that are slightly less serious? Have you not made up? Did you decide that actually something had happened to you, someone had wronged you, and you decided
Keep right to stay on M4.
You stand by. 0345 6060 973. I wonder, how did your apology feel to give if you gave one, or to receive if you received one? You don't have to give your real name. It's a very, very personal subject. You don't have to give details that might identify you, but perhaps it's someone who bullied you at school, perhaps someone who from childhood who actually you treated badly and think, I really wish I had the opportunity to forgive them. And maybe if you haven't done it, if you thought about it, tell us why. 0345 6060 973. More on this coming up. First, let's get some news headlines. 6:34 the time. Amelia.
The Queen has been thanked for staying the course at a service of Thanksgiving at St Paul's Cathedral. The royal family gathered for a second day of celebrations marking the Platinum Jubilee. At least 4 people have been killed and dozens are injured after a train derailed in southern Germany. 3 carriages were overturned shortly after noon in Bergrain. And a serial sex offender who absconded from an open prison has been arrested after a 3-day search. Gary Butcher, who has a number of convictions for sex attacks on women, is serving a life sentence for aggravated burglary. LBC weather, dry with clear spells in the north and far west tonight. Some heavy rain moving into the far south, a low of 4 degrees.
LBC.
I'm David Lammy here on LBC. Priti Patel has made massive reversals to stop and search. It's back with a vengeance. I grew up in an era of sus laws. I feared the police growing up. I remember the first time I was stopped and searched, age 12, patted down by a police officer. I was so scared. Join me, David Lammy, tomorrow from 4. Listen on your radio and on Global Player. LBC.
At Free Now, we're best known for our taxis, but actually we're the mobility super app with more ways to get around. Travelling around London has never been easier. So you can step on it with e-scooters, get motoring this afternoon with private hire cars, or live life in the cycle lane with e-bikes. And just like always, if you need a taxi, all you do is tap and go. Free Now, get there your way.
Today's tale begins when Sarah was scrolling through her feed. Suddenly, Sarah heard a mysterious sound.
The Wi-Fi is down.
Sarah was trapped by the spinning wheel of doom.
Save yourself from broadband nightmares. Get BT's unbreakable hybrid broadband backed up by EE, the UK's best network. Search BT Hybrid Broadband. 88% UK availability. 4G connection takes up to 175 seconds. Best for mobile network performance. Verify at EE.
In 2 miles, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
Business plan and built your website. Then you took the leap and opened a shop. Heard your Uncle Paul tell you, most businesses don't make it past the first year, but you breezed past the first year. Then you discovered BT's digital marketing hub, an easy way to advertise online. Suddenly you had so many new customers you had to open a second store. Take that, Paul. You do your business, we'll help you find more. Search BT Digital Marketing Hub. BT means business.
We've got it at Selco. Selco is where the trade goes.
At Selco Builders Warehouse, we've got a special offer to celebrate the Queen's Jubilee. We've got an amazing extra £70 off the real deal price of natural stone paving project packs, available in Autumn, Grey and Sahara. Now at the even lower price of £452.20 per pack, that's just £21.61 per square metre. Now that's a Jubilee deal.
We've got it at Selco. Selco is where the trade goes.
See selcobw.com for details. Offer ends 12th of June, VAT charged at 20%.
Leading Britain's conversation, LBC, with Ben Kentish.
Just gone 6:38. Before we get back to our conversation about forgiveness, do you think it's right for Jada Pinkett Smith to call on Will Smith and Chris Rock to reconcile after Slapgate? Also asking, of course, about your experiences of whether you had to try and forgive someone, whether you had a decision to make as to whether you wanted to seek someone's forgiveness or give someone forgiveness. And there's all sorts of ways this manifests. It doesn't have to be as sort of severe a situation as some of the ones we've heard about. James has texted in, I was recently contacted on social media by someone who bullied me all the way through secondary school and made my teenage years absolute hell. I don't think I could ever forgive, and 41 years old now, and it still haunts me, the things that he did, the hiding that I had to do, and the people that used to go to him to make it worse. That's James saying actually he could never forgive someone who bullied him. Bullying has an astonishingly deep, long-term impact. It can change your life.
In a quarter of a mile, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
I know some different situations. Someone who was bullied did contact, a friend did contact the person that bullied them, and they did basically say what had happened, and the other person forgave them. There were people at our school that were bullies that made
exit at junction 6.
I thought about actually contacting in the past, and because part of me wants them to know that they made lots of other people's life really, really difficult. And
in a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the third exit onto Tons Lane, A355.
Almost satisfaction of knowing that, 30 years on, 20 years on, that people are still thinking about them, that they mattered in that way. I almost wanted them to be insignificant. So it's difficult. It's difficult to know when to forgive, and it's difficult to know when to seek forgiveness and when to give it. We'll get back to this in just a moment. First, though, I want to speak to Claire Reynolds, the director of BEAT. This is about patients with eating disorders being sent from England all the way to Scotland because of a lack of beds. Very, very worrying. A damning indictment on the state of our mental health services. Claire, thank you for joining us today. What's going so wrong? This is a really worrying revelation, isn't it?
Exit the roundabout onto Tons Lane.
When they're in a state of really serious mental ill health, to a far distance away from their support network, away from their family and friends. It's also incredibly damaging for the family as well, in that they then have to make huge journeys and sacrifices to still try and support
in a quarter of a mile, turn left towards Sippenham Lane.
Just about, again, we come back to under-resourcing of mental health services.
Yeah, I mean, since 2019, we know the demand for support with eating disorders has soared, and the NHS just simply can't keep up. But I think the really important point to make is that the answer isn't necessarily more inpatient services. It's getting those early intervention and those community services built. It's building the NHS to be able to deal with this in the local community.
How important is it for people with mental health problems generally, but particularly with eating disorders, to be in an area...
Turn left towards Sippenham Lane.
...friends and family who can come and visit rather than hundreds of miles away in a different part of the country?
Yeah, I mean, numerous research has shown that recovery is faster.
Continue for 1.5 miles.
And much less if you have the support of your close family and friends. And it also reduces the risk. If somebody's sent a long way away for treatment, they've then got to make a huge adjustment in that transition when they come back home again, which again really increases their chance of relapse. So being able to receive treatment at a very early stage before the situation's got to the stage where they need inpatients, and for that to be where they can be surrounded by people that love them and support them is critical.
Is there anything that people can do if they or a loved one are trying, if they are about to be sent a long, long way away for treatment? Is there anything they can do to try to ensure that doesn't happen, that the treatment is available closer to home, or is it something that people are simply having to put up with?
I think, unfortunately, if you get to that stage, you need to take the treatment, and that person is in need of critical treatment. I guess what we want people to do is be much more aware of eating disorders, to spot the signs earlier, and really try and get help at that much earlier stage so we don't get to this point.
Claire, lovely to speak to you. Claire Reynolds, director of the eating disorder charity BEAT. A very, very worrying phenomenon, as I say. Another concerning story about the state of mental health services in this country, significantly underfunded despite the increase in recent years, I would say, for people who are in incredibly vulnerable positions with severe eating disorders, having to be sent hundreds of miles from Scotland because there's no beds available in England. Deeply, deeply disturbing. This is 100 women from England were sent to hospitals in Scotland since 2017, costing more than £10 million. That's including those under the age of 18. One patient had to stay in the hospital for a year, costing, in that case alone, more than £250,000 because there wasn't treatment available closer to home. Back to our conversation about forgiveness. I really want to hear your stories on this because we've had a few callers and lots of texts coming in. This one says, no name on this. Good afternoon, Ben. My sister married a prolific gambler who stole from us all and the family business. She stood by him and covered for him. My mum, brother and I forgave them, and my sister lost the plot completely and disowned us all. It's been 15 years with no contact with our niece and nephew. My mum wanted to give her inheritance to help her a few years ago because she knew she was desperate. We all agreed this was the right thing to do. It's heartbreaking. That is heartbreaking. 15 years with no contact with your niece and nephew. I do wonder, and there's no name on this text, but I do wonder, what's stopping you? What's stopping you reaching out? What's stopping you trying to forgive your sister, who it sounds like behaved pretty badly? I don't know her side of the story, I don't know her reasons, of course, but what's stopping you? It's really difficult, forgiveness, but I do, as we were hearing at the top of the hour from our relationship counsellor, it often, and our callers, it often helps the person more to put things to one side and say, look, I don't know if I can ever forget, I don't know if I can move on completely, but I want to try and forgive and I want to try and restore some sort of relationship. And I think, you know, we're talking about a few people texting in about their experience of school and bullying. I wonder if that's you. If you were a bully at school, would you like the opportunity to apologise? Would you like the opportunity